Hi everybody. The last couple of videos we've talked about personal devices and limiting personal device access to our Office 365 information. We talked about doing this through a Windows MAM, which is a newer method of doing it. Windows only, of course, but it has advantages. We can limit, cut, copy, paste, those types of things. We've also talked about it doing it via app enforced restrictions, which is the older way to do it, which can be applied to other platforms, including Macintosh. And we specifically went through how to do that with Macintosh. The app enforced restrictions is a great tool. We can be very specific with it on the SharePoint side of things. We can even point it at certain sites and put those restrictions just on those sites. So I figured, why don't we take a look at that via something called sensitivity labeling, another topic that we've done videos on. None recently. We'll probably want to revisit that in the next week or two, so we'll do another video on that, but this will be a short primer into it today. Okay, everybody, let's take a look at app enforced restrictions, a quick review on setting it up via SharePoint for the entire corpus of SharePoint sites, and then we'll talk about what do we do if we actually want to do this at a site-by-site level. Or do other stuff on a site-by-site level. What's involved with that? Well, as a reminder, I do have, this is the SharePoint Center, obviously. I do have my access control node over here to the left, and I have an unmanaged devices link here. When I click on that, you can see I still have it set to allow limited web-only access, and this is what gets us the no download access in SharePoint. So when I go to a SharePoint or OneDrive site through the browser, again, I have to have a conditional access policy that triggers this. If I do that, then I have those limitations set against me, but that's for every site and team. What if I just want to limit it to certain ones? Well, you can see there's a little link here. It says if you don't want to limit or block access organization-wide, you can do so for specific sites. Learn how to control access to those sites using the PowerShell. Well, sure, the PowerShell, we can do things that way. But there's a better way to do this, I think, and that's by using Microsoft's sensitivity labeling. Now, sensitivity labeling actually covers two different types of things in Microsoft. One is the labeling of files and emails. We're not talking about that. Microsoft also uses sensitivity labeling for applying settings to sites. Or let's call them containers, all right? Sites, teams, libraries. Now, they put this under the umbrella of sensitivity labels. You can argue with that or agree with that or disagree. I have a little bit of a problem with it because it does not label the files in those sites. It's just a way to put some settings down on a site. In either case, though, it's a great functionality. Let's take a quick look at that. I'm going to come over to my Purview Center. I'm going to stick with the old Purview portal for now, but you can see there's a new Purview portal that's going to supersede the current one at the end of this year. We'll take a look at that when we do a full labeling video. We'll probably do that for our next video or the video following that if we don't have any more follow-up on the unmanaged device video set. So inside of here, you can see I have a few labels set up, and you can see the scope of them. Most are for the first few say file and email. Yeah, these are for actually applying labels to files, to emails, and the label can stay with those files and emails. They can encrypt those files or emails if we want. They can be used for DLP decisions on those files or emails if we want. But then you'll notice I have other scopes here for three other labels, one called Site Internal Access Only, another one called Site Guest Access, Let me refresh my labels here. And then one called Site Internal Restricted Read Only for Unmanaged Devices. Yes, that's the one that we're going to specifically use. And it says Site Unified Group. Unified Group is an Office 365 group, right? Office 365 groups, when you create one of those, you get a team. The team is backed with a SharePoint site. So it all kind of comes together. So it's kind of the same thing. So we have these ready to go. So what do they do? Well, let's take a quick look at all of these. Internal access only. Well, I've done 2 of these to provide for external and internal access through guests. And that's a nice thing to add on to this read-only for unmanaged devices, because what about guest access? Do I limit just my internal users and make them come in with managed devices, so, in order for them to use regular applications to get to those sites, or do I do the same thing for guests? Well, guests is a little bit of a hairy proposition there, because guests don't have devices in my tenant. How's my tenant going to check to see if those guests are sitting at a managed or unmanaged device? So, at first we don't have a way to do that in our sites. Now, we do actually have a sort of a way to do that. There's a cross-tenant connection we can make to other tenants, and we can read, whether their users are coming to our tenant from managed devices in their tenant. Yeah, we can do that, but in general, it's not set up. We have to do that for individual tenants. So let's leave that on the back burner for now. We assume that we're not giving guests access to a bunch of stuff. So that right there is the mitigation for us. But if we want to go further, we could actually exclude guests from accessing certain of our sites. And that's probably the way to go. We can also do access reviews after the fact. So let's just take a brief look at this. This is really not what I want to talk about. These first 2 sites, the site labels. The third label is the one I want to talk about. Well, let's see what these do though. So this one, if I edit this label, and we can kind of see what it does, but editing the labels is a little bit easier to read. I got the name, there's a priority, higher priority ones. If there's a conflict, take precedence, obviously. This one just applies to groups and sites. Great, that's all I want to do. I could combine it and also put some file settings on there, but I don't like to combine container labels with file labels. I don't think they have really anything to do with each other. They could, but for the most part, they don't. They might be used for the same users or the same general high-level purpose, but where the rubber meets the road, they have nothing in common. So you can see I don't have any protection for those things. Here I have defined protection for groups and sites, privacy, and external users. Yeah, I could do that. I could keep external users from accessing this in general. I can prevent users from being added to the group. It's weird. You can do a couple of things here. Limit sharing or limit people getting added to the group, external guests. Kind of the same thing, but they're treated separately here. Again, we'll do another video on that. So here I have external sharing and conditional access chosen here. And I don't have the private team. That's more for internal stuff. So here I can see control external sharing from labeled SharePoint sites, only people in your organization. All right, so I'm choosing, I only want people in my organization to have access to this. So when people come, when members of the site come in and they want to share a folder or they want to share a file, they're going to click on the file, they're going to click on the little sharing symbol. They're not going to be able to share it with external people. They can type in an external user, but they're going to be prevented. It's not going to give them the option. In fact, it's going to clearly say you can share this with people internal, and it's going to leave out the word external. It's smart enough to do that. And if you type somebody's name in there, it's not going to find it, and external users. So this one is only going to allow sharing internally. And I'm going to cancel this, so let me move my picture out of the way again. All right, so that one only for internal. What about this guest access? Well, you can figure out that one's not going to limit it to internal users. So as I go through this one, click on next, I see groups and sites is chosen here. I see external sharing is selected. I've actually also chosen this privacy and external user access. That's who's allowed to be added to the group. Define privacy. I haven't really defined the privacy, but I've chosen to let Office 365, my users, add external users, guests, to their groups. All right, that's another way to give someone access. If you belong to the group, well, you have access to what the group has access to, right, including the files. Slightly different than going through the sharing process. I wish it were all under the same umbrella, but through the years, this is just how it's developed. All right, so here's something. This one allows me to share with guests. So even though I can't, I've actually allowed external users to be added to the group. And here I'm also allowing my people who are in the site itself to do that sharing. We're not adding people to the group. We're just sharing individual files or individual folders. I'm allowing that. New and existing guests. All right. So that's one thing it can do. Labeling. Here's what's I wanted to talk about. Doing the thing we were talking about earlier, the restricting access to unmanaged devices based on sites instead of the entire SharePoint list of sites. So let's see what this one does. This is for that purpose. I'm going to edit this. Click on the next button. I see groups and sites again is chosen. See external sharing and conditional access is also chosen. Right? And here, I've done two things. I'll get back to the top part. The bottom part, use Entra conditional access to protect labeled SharePoint sites. Allow limited web-only access. That's our limited thing where you can't download stuff. So if someone applies this to a site, then that's the same as all that'll take up that policy, the conditional access policy, that says if you're on an unmanaged device, you cannot access this, and also you get the pretty almost the read only. Although we can change things, you can't download stuff, right? So this allows me to do that site by site. On top of that, I've also added in that since this is for my internal users mostly, I've gone ahead and said only people in my company can access that site. So if I apply this label to a site, two things are going to happen. Number one, only users in my site will have access to it. And number two, if they're not if they're not sitting on a managed device, they're going to get the limited web-only access. All right. So how do we make that happen? Well, labels are great, but you need to deliver labels to people in order for them to choose labels to apply. So how do we give people the ability to do that? Well, we do that through label policies. I'm going to click on label policies, and I see I have a couple of policies in here. I have a file and email policy, not for us today. I have an internal sites only label policy. Let's take a look at what that one does. This one is going to allow the people that I give access to this policy. These people can apply this internal read or internal access only, or the internal restricted one, which it does the web only view. So people can choose either one of those. Right? Don't worry about this Exchange email published to. This is published to everybody. That's just how it reads here, again, because of historical way they used to do this. And then the policy setting, label is mandatory. Somebody's got to choose a label. So if you're in this group, you get this policy. You must choose a label. And right now, you're stuck between these two internal labels. So if this applies to, and it looks like this applies to everybody, well, they can only assign internal labels. One of them is the restricted one. One of them is just the one where guests are not allowed. So what if we actually wanted to allow guests in there as well? We'll create a label policy because I do have that other guest one. So I'm going to create one for, let's say, my executives or my sales team. They need to do external labeling. So I'm going to find my sites here. I'll say that they get to see all of these. I'll add all of them. Click on next. I'm not going to scope this for administrative reasons for other administrators to use. Instead of going into this all users, I'm going to choose specific users. And I'll choose a user. I have my user call named, let's say, Beth. Beth's a good user. There she is. All right. So other settings here, if I'm really trying to lock things down, I kind of need to force people to choose a label. I've already forced it in the default label policy. I should probably force these people to choose a label as well so that they get into the game. They must choose a label. They cannot leave it unlabeled because an unlabeled site would just take whatever the defaults were. In our case, my case, the defaults are that, we do the web only from unmanaged devices. But my purpose here is to show you how you don't have to do that. We can do it to individual sites. So if you're going to turn it off globally and just do it site by site, you kind of need to force people to choose a label so that they choose whether it's the web only label or whether maybe it's the external label or internal label. Let's force them to choose a label. All right. So I'm not going to force people to justify removing or changing labels, but I am going to require people choose a label for sites. Now, that's not this one because this one is for email and documents. Here's where for Power BI. Here's a help page. That's nice. I could do that. I'm going to click on next. Default label to sites and groups. I'm not going to put a default label on a site and group. I could, but I am going to require users to apply a label. So I'm going to check off that, click on next. We'll call this one executive internal external access. So when most people in a company go to create a site or a team, they are going to be forced to choose a label. And most of them, though, are only going to see those two internal labels. Fair enough. Beth here, though, will see the other label. That's if I've remembered to set her priority, this label policy priority to highest, which I have. And the priorities on these labels and the label policies, the highest priority always takes precedence over a lower priority. So even though Beth is a member of the all users, she's a member of that, she gets both of these policies, but this one is going to take precedence. So she'll have that extra label applied to her. All right, let's go and take a look at what users are going to see when these policies get to them. And remember that these policies, they go to different areas. They actually go up into the cloud to SharePoint and Exchange, and those are fairly quickly resolvable. If I go to the web version of Teams or SharePoint or OWA, I'll see the label almost immediately. Labels also have to go down to clients, like fat clients, like 32-bit, the Win32 clients, like Teams and Outlook and Word and Excel. That might take a little bit longer because your Office clients have to check in with the service and download that stuff. Doesn't happen like all the time, so you might see a little bit of a delay in something like that. And also Cloud App Security, Microsoft Cloud App for Business, same thing there. All right, well, let's go ahead and look. We'll do the web version. Let's see what people are going to see when they create a new team or a site. So let's take a look at one of these users' experience. We'll go with my Meg user 1. Here's my virtual machine again. Meg user 1 only has access to those two internal labels for a site. So let's see what happens when he creates a team. I'll do this from the Teams app. Of course, you can do it from a browser as well. After you set up these labels, be cautious if you're testing this out. It does take a while for these labels to reach their intended location where they would be applied. In the cloud, if you do it from a browser, it reaches that area fairly quickly. For solid apps like Teams, like this one, it may take a little while. It may take an entire day before they're updated. And that goes for Outlook and also Word and Excel, the Office apps. Outlook has a weird trick. If you look it up, you can. There's I believe, a registry setting that you can use to reset it, but pretty much you have to wait. Okay, so here I am creating a new team. I'll just call it test. And you can see, here's my sensitivity label. I did not choose one. It just lists one there because I have to choose one. And it's not going to say none and give me an error. In the case of Teams, it just shows me those two to choose from. I don't have the option for none. So you might want to choose a default for this, especially if people are creating teams from the Teams app, because this is the way it acts. So you could choose a default label as well as a mandatory label. Default labels, mandatory labels are available in that Microsoft E3 license, so you don't need the bigger Microsoft E5 or the compliance E5 license to get those functionalities. The bigger licenses, for the most part, are just for automatic labeling and all all forms of that exact data match included, that kind of stuff. All right, so I have to choose one. So I'll choose the one for unmanaged devices. And that's pretty much it. I'll click on create. Now this is going to act like SharePoint acted when I just chose the umbrella unmanaged devices. I still have a conditional access policy in place to prevent downloads from unmanaged devices. So if you don't want to do everything in SharePoint, if you don't want to point to every site in SharePoint, this is a good way to do it. Otherwise, people have to kind of remember to do it, but this way it kind of forces them to do it. You can create your labels, put the properties on there you want. In fact, you have other properties as well. As we saw, you can do public and private, which is pretty much for your organization users, whether the site is going to be visible. Somebody can just search for it and knock on the door and ask if they can join it, or if it's private, meaning you got to be added to get any chance of access at all. And then you can also just block external access completely with those labels as well. But don't forget that the main purpose of this video is to show you that you can choose that web-only access. We can force a web-only access experience just for individual sites instead of doing it for the entire SharePoint corpus of sites. Now, what if you wanted to do it to OneDrive? Well, you're probably going to get into PowerShell and do that for that one OneDrive, which you can always do. You can always set this information directly on sites or OneDrives using the PowerShell. This is just a super easy way for new sites to kind of force people into the game and have them choose a label that's appropriate for their sites. All right. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll probably move on. We'll talk about some other stuff next week. But until then, stay safe out there.